Hi, and welcome back to the History Hut as we continue our Confederation discussion here in History Hut, Canada.
Yeah,
I'm Jim, this is Dr. K, and we're just going to dive right back into it.
Yeah.
What happened at the first Charlottetown Conference?
Okay, so here you have all these central Canadian politicians going, yeah, where are you meeting, when are you meeting, we're coming, and that's exactly what they do. So they ask if they can attend as observers, and then they send lots of people down through the summer months, you know, dropping business right, left and centres, journalists like yourself go down, and then come September the politicians all show up on the steamboat, the Queen Victoria, and when they get there there aren't enough hotel rooms for them. And it's not because, and the place is absolutely mobbed with people, and Charlottetown's just crazy with people, not because Anne of Green Gables is on again, no, because the Sleigh Mayors and Nichols Circus has shown up, and it's the first time it's been there in 20 years, and people have poured in from all over the place, and so all of the little hotels are all busy, so the politicians all have to sleep on the boat. So you've got people that don't particularly get on very well with each other, all complaining about how much John A. Macdonald's drinking on the Queen Victoria. So they go in as observers, they say that they'll come in as observers, but they actually ask if they can speak, and speak they do. Now this is the period before TV and radio and iPads and everything. So when they say speak, they really mean it. They don't mean like, oh, I'll go in for 5 minutes and have a little chat about Confederation. They go in, and MacDonald speaks for the whole day on Friday about the Senate and general arguments for Confederation. Then Galt goes in, he's the railway guy, he goes in and he talks all day Saturday about finance, and then George Brown goes in on Monday and he talks about all the constitutional details, and then after they've like just 8 hours a day or whatever, even more than that maybe, the Maritimers are like, okay, they talk to them just early on the Tuesday morning, and then the Maritimers are like, okay, well thanks very much, that was really great, if you guys could all wait out in the hall, that'd be good. And then they go ahead and discuss the proposals, and more or less just kind of go, you know what, their idea sounds pretty good. We can't, every time they discuss Confederation amongst themselves, they had 4 different custom systems, 4 different sets of stamps. They had different everything, and they would have had to have given up like 3/4 of their politicians, because you couldn't have kept like all the Newfie politicians, all the Nova Scotian ones. You would have had to have kind of had 3/4 unemployment, and then they were arguing over where the capital should be. Not everybody wanted it to be in Halifax. So this way they're like, well, this way none of us will lose our jobs, and we'll get to send people to Ottawa. So we kind of, double representation. So they're quite happy about it. And so the Canadian delegation goes, okay, well, we've kind of agreed in principle. We'll all meet up again in October in Quebec City. And so all the Maritime politicians come up to Quebec City for the next big meeting, and all the women's dance cards are filled, and all the young, lads, or sons of politicians, are all out there to escort young ladies about town. And MacDonald more or less, sits in a room and writes up what Confederation will look like. And so when they work it out, they work out the 72 resolutions, and that's what becomes the fundamentals of the British North America Act. So the general outline is just kind of, they'll continue the monarchy. They'll create a central government that will have residual powers. If there's something that hasn't been mentioned, then they'll have to look after it. They'll have a 2-chamber legislature, the House of Commons, and an upper house, and the upper house will be represented by regions, so it would be Atlantic Canada, Quebec, and Ontario. A system of responsible government, and an appointment of Governor General by the monarch, which is more or less what we kind of still have. And each province would have a lieutenant governor, and then a federal government that could disallow legislation within a year. This isn't a big issue at first. French Canadians are a bit worried about it. It's not an issue at first, but it does become an issue at times. One of the times is for Alberta during the period of William Aberhart, when he passes laws that are considered to be ultra vires, above his powers, and the government has to disallow that. The power of direct taxation was to lie with the federal government only, and there were provisions made to allow the other parts of British North America to come in later on. I can see you're just nodding off from this part. You're like, oh, okay, the political part, yeah, oh, that's exciting, man. So they aim to have, so they've got this all kind of organized. They've got their kind of three, I like to think of it as three basic groups, because it was the United Province of Canada. So you've got, Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick, and the aim was to get it all passed before the New Brunswick elections of June of 1865, and so they make the resolutions public in November of 1864, and that allows the Premier of New Brunswick, Tilley, who will be a father of Confederation now, to campaign on it. But of course, he was defeated by the anti-Confederation forces of evil. Oh yes, and it's the Fenian raids in 1866 that turn the temper of the province in New Brunswick in favour of Confederation. So as early as 1865, one part of the two groups in the east that had said they'd come in had obviously hadn't been very happy about it, and PEI were not on, they were not interested. Newfoundland not interested at all, so they'd only got 2 out of the 4, and now one of them had already kind of taken it to the people and they'd voted against it. Newfoundland rejected the 72 resolutions outright, and there's a guy called Anthony Musgrave who is sent out as the Lieutenant Governor, and he's sent out to see it pass and gets absolutely nowhere at all. The British aren't very happy with him, and later on the Colonial Office actually sends him to BC to try and get BC to come into Confederation and say to him, if you don't make it this time, your career is toast, and so he works even a little harder in British Columbia. Prince Edward Island's not really interested, as I said, not interested in having any economic links with the province of the Canadas. And, to be fair, the Atlantic provinces really don't do a lot of business with Central Canada, and they don't consider themselves to be anything like the people in Central Canada. They don't have any kind of, emotional connection. Ottawa wasn't the beautiful place it is today. It was a, shanty town around the buildings of the Parliament buildings, and people are like, it used to be called Bytown. People are like, whoa, it's just like this horrible little shanty town in the middle of nowhere. Why would we give our allegiance to that when we could stay and give our allegiance to London, and we do most of our trade with the outside world? So there's not a lot of simpatico between the Atlantic provinces and the interior. So it's quite a different story than the one that we celebrate on July 1st, is it? Yeah. Where we all go, oh yes, it's like inevitable, and it was
when
wonderful.
They signed the thing, and
we all wanted it. So it's not like that.
They got their picture taken for the money. And,
That's right. John A. Macdonald going, I want to be on the $10 bill. So. For instance, in New Brunswick, I said to you that Tilley was defeated at the polls, and now there's a new Premier, Premier Smith, and he's the target of both Canadian politicians and British politicians because they try and undermine him because he's anti-Confederation. Right, so and they're all like, "Oh, come on, the whole thing's just going to fall apart now if this one group leaves." And you can see how that would happen. Next would be Nova Scotia. It'd be like, I don't know if we should stay in. So. The Lieutenant Governor was encouraged to cause a little bit of trouble, and he did this by persuading the new anti-Confederation Premier to accept a passage in the throne speech that favoured Confederation. So, that's not good. And then the Legislative Council began to obstruct the work of the elected Assembly, and they passed resolutions favouring the 72 resolutions at the Quebec Conference, and then the Assembly refused to follow them because, of course, they had elected anti-Confederation people, and Premier Smith was counselled by the Lieutenant Governor to resign and to call an election. So it's like intense pressure on the guy. And so the Canadians and the British government put a lot of money into the campaign, and Tilley scrapes through, thanks in part to the fear caused by the Fenian attack. And so he brought the Quebec resolutions to the House, and they passed. So, almost out, saved at the last minute. And then Nova Scotia, Charles Tupper was the leader, and he was worried enough that he didn't even introduce a resolution to accept the 72 resolutions from Quebec. So again, it's a different reading of what we normally think of when we think before the summit series. You know, when
Right.
we're thinking about Confederate, it's different. The lieutenant governor in Nova Scotia was anti-Confederation, so he's replaced. And in the end, Tupper gets his resolution to pass the 72 resolutions, gets it passed in the lower house, and I don't think he even takes it to the upper house. So the politicians know that this is their dream, but that they haven't actually managed to pull the population along with them. And they're like, "Come on, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Where are you? Where are you? You know, I've gone around the corner." In the province of the Canadas, it's debated in early 1865. In the upper house, it passes easily with a majority of French Canadians voting yes. It has the same result in the lower house. So now you're probably saying to me, well, at least somebody was happy about Confederation.
Surely.
Dr. K. This proves it, and it doesn't prove it at all. What it proves is that French Canadians and Anglo Canadians were thinking, how can we possibly get out of this horrible situation that we're in, where we've been forcibly kind of shoved together in this united province? And if we vote in favor of Confederation, then we will again be able to control our own destiny. Ontario will look after all its own stuff. We'll look after all our own stuff. We'll never have to talk to them. We don't want to. And then if there's war or, you know, some big issue, it will go to the federal Parliament in Ottawa, but the federal Parliament isn't going to intervene in our affairs. Maître chez nous, we're masters in our own house. Yeah, we. So the two groups in Central Canada seem to have agreed because it gave them freedom from each other. So bringing them together allows them to actually separate. Right. So the French Canadians who are in favor of Confederation, I know, French Canadians who are in favor of Confederation, then we're like, well, it's going to be okay because the federal government's never going to intervene in our affairs, and Ontario is never going to ever intervene in our affairs again. And for Ontarians, they're like, we don't have to live with all those French Canadian guys anymore. We'll look after our own stuff. So again, in the end, they come together so that they can be split apart. Oh, they're just crazy. So the Rouge Party opposed Confederation or the Parti Rouge opposed it on the basis that it would end the survival of French Canada, and they'd be swamped by Anglo culture and they'd be left unprotected. So they're not happy about it. But the Parti Bleu, they are okay with it because that's, you know, the party of John A. Macdonald's best friend, best buddy, his BFF, George Etienne Cartier. So he's Macdonald's #1 guy in Quebec, and he's with the Conservatives there, so the Parti Bleu. By 1866, the 72 resolutions had been received in London, and they passed with minimal change in March of 1867. And I was telling some of my students that when they were in London, John A. Macdonald, I believe, got drunk one night and left his candle on, and it tipped over and nearly burned down the room that he was in, the hotel room that he was in. And then one of the other ones was hanging out in the East End of London, up to no good, I think. So anyway, Canada set to emerge as a new body, a new political body anyway, July 1st, 1867. Then the question moved on to what should it be called. A lot of people thought it should be the Kingdom of Canada, but then they were worried that the Americans wouldn't like that, the Kingdom, and so it became the Dominion of Canada, the Dominion of Canada. And great celebrations, of course, planned for Ottawa July 1st, but it was a wet, rainy Monday, I think, and the train from the east was late, so the Nova Scotian delegation didn't even get there in time for the government to be sworn in.
Well, they are a half hour behind, aren't they?
Yeah, they're an extra hour ahead. And then the Maritime newspapers, people just were not happy about it. And the Maritime newspapers, the day of Confederation, black-rimmed for death. You know, it's like the death of Nova Scotia, the death of New Brunswick. So people flew their flags at half-mast and stuff, you know, as really took it badly. And you know, a lot of them felt that their life was really over. But the great celebrations in Toronto in particular, and I'll just read you a little quote. In Toronto, enthusiasm was unreserved. The whole night was lit up by public celebrations, including a huge firework that spelled out, "Rule Britannia." Meanwhile, shut up in his newspaper office, George Brown wrote a 9,000-word essay on the subject of the hour. It began with the words, "With the first dawn of this gladsome midsummer morn, we hail the birthday of a new nationality, a united British America." yada, yada, yada. None of my students ever write me 9,000 word essays, but he just
and
did
it's
it
a
kind of
good
just
thing.
like off the, oh yeah, it would take forever to mark those. And people in Montreal came out as well, but not for the reason that you'd think they came out, because it was a tightrope walker doing a particularly dangerous tightrope routine with a baby in a pram.
Oh wow.
On a high wire. So people were out for that. So it's a crazy thing, this Confederation, and I think if you look at this part, it helps explain why when the government was trying to make constitutional changes with the Charlottetown Accord, of course going back to that moment in Charlottetown when you had the original, and they do that on purpose, of course, and then the Meech Lake Accord, why it was very difficult to work out, and people were just all over the place about it. It's because the original one was it's a bit of a crapshoot as well. There's a lot of worries about that. I'll just read you a couple of quotes, though, if I might. These are some of the pro-Confederation quotes. So Galt, who's one of the men that spoke at Charlottetown, he said, "Let us look at the immense territory that stretches away west of Upper Canada. One of the first acts of the general government of the United Provinces will be to enter into public obligations for the purpose of opening up and developing that vast region and of making it a source of strength." So looking to the west. McGee said, "A Canadian nationality, not French Canadian or British Canadian or Irish Canadian, is, in my opinion, what we should look forward to. And we should be prepared to defend that to the death." George Brown said, "Our new relationship with England means we should be able to defend ourselves. I'm not sure how, because we didn't have an army. Our changed relations with our neighbouring republic means we must be able to do so." So there's still the fear after Confederation that we'll actually have to man the borders, and it'll be better you than me. I'm too old to man a border. "The Americans," he says, "are now a warlike people. They have a large army, a powerful navy, and an unlimited supply of munitions. We too must put our country in a state of preparedness for war. War or no war, the need to defend these provinces cannot be delayed, and the best way to do so is through the proposed union." So this sense that it's for our defence. John A. MacDonald, "If we wish to be a great people, if we wish to form a great nationality, commanding the respect of the world, able to hold our own against all opponents, this can only be obtained by union." And he means Confederation. "If we do not take advantage of the time, if we show ourselves unequal to the occasion, it may never return, and we shall hereafter bitterly regret having failed to embrace the opportunity now offered of founding a great nation." So that's the kind of style of the pro-Confederation people. Now the anti-Confederation arguments are interesting as well. This is J.B. Dorian, Canada East. And he just says, he's talking about the resolutions. "The first resolution is nonsense. It's not a federal union that's offered to us, but a legislative union in disguise. Federalism is completely eliminated from this scheme, which centres everything in the general government. All is weakened, and annihilation. There will be annihilation in the local government." Joseph Howe, who we're going to talk about again, from Nova Scotia, says, this is what he has to say in a letter from 1867, May of 1867. "Both parties in Canada have treated us with equal barbarity and oppression, trampling upon our franchises and dragging us into this confederation without our consent. From Tories, such treatment was to be expected, but that Liberals and Reformers would so act never entered our heads. We must submit, of course, because we cannot fight the British government, but if the Queen's troops were withdrawn, I would die upon the frontier rather than submit to such an outrage." So not a happy man. Our first duty will be to punish the rascals here who have betrayed us and sold us. If then convinced that the Canadians are disposed to act fairly, we may try the experiment and endeavour to work with the new system without much caring who leads or drives. The feeling here at present is a plague on both your houses. Oh, I think that's from Romeo and Juliet, I think. From Quebec, this is Joseph Perrault. "The real object of Confederation is nothing less than the elimination of French influence in Canada." The French Canadians look back to the conquest as the ultimate betrayal. This is second in line. "With Confederation, we shall be the minority in the general parliament, which is all the important powers. We will constantly have to fight to defend our political rights and our liberty." And then two comments from Americans. William Seward, who was the Secretary of State, in America. I know that nature designs that this whole continent, not merely these 36 states, ooh, they got a few extra ones after that, not merely these 36 states shall be sooner or later within the magic circle of the American Union. It's like, oh, we don't actually have to do anything. We'll just watch this whole Confederation thing fall apart, and then we can just go in. We won't even have to march in. We'll just kind of take it over. And then this is Representative Bell of Ohio. Speaking in 1853, this is the policy of manifest destiny. There is a country and a people competent for self-government whom we may find in our interest to receive amongst us and allow to become part and parcel of this country. Destiny has ordained the annexation of that territory to the Union. So you're just like, yeah, it's never
not so fast, partner.
That's right. It's like, just hold off there, buddy. So you know, a lot of anti-Confederation feeling, the sense that politicians are really pushing for it, but maybe the population in Canada not quite on the same side, and we'll see that we saw New Brunswick almost getting out of it before it even started, and we'll see in another episode we will see Nova Scotia trying to get out as well, and John A. Macdonald just kind of tearing his hair out and going, what do I have to do to keep this thing together? It's just crazy. So it's not as kind of inevitable and clean, clear cut and stuff as we often think it was. It's, you know, it's blood and guts and drama and all sorts of cool stuff.
Well, it seems to have panned out, so that's good.
Yeah, we're still all together. That's for sure. Yeah, that's a nice way of looking at it. And we've become a great hockey nation, which was also unexpected, probably at the time. I'm sure
that they wish they'd annexed us now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So we should probably we'll probably stop there for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll continue our discussion of Canadian history.
Canadian bacon upstairs.
Yeah.
And a couple
all
of
that
brewskis.
Sort of stereotypical stuff.
Yeah, we'll have some brewskis. We'll watch a game. We'll bark. We'll, you know, whatever.
That might be American, that last one.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's American. Okay, so we'll just have some brewskis and we'll go, and
that might be copyrighted.
Oh, damn. Okay, we'll have to change a bit of it.
We'll make our own.
Next time we'll talk briefly about the British North America Act, because I saw your eyes glazing over whenever I mentioned political stuff. And then we'll talk about John A. Macdonald, who's this like great figure, larger than life figure from my hometown.
Yeah, Ronald's great grandpa.
Oh, very funny. Do you know that in one of those polls they take every once in a while, 50% of people thought that John A. Macdonald had something to do with McDonald's?
Yeah,
it's so sad. So sad.
Well, we'll hear what he's all about next time.
Okay. Bye.